Centuries of European naval exploration had preceded Sir John Barrow when he assumed the office of Second Secretary of the Admiralty of the United Kingdom in 1804. In his 41 years in office, Barrow promoted the idea of finding a northwest passage across Canada, which would offer a practical way to cross the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. In the decades that followed, a number of renowned explorers, among them the well-known William Edward Parry, set out to chart the Canadian Arctic in an effort to unravel its many mysteries. Sir John Franklin, a Royal Navy officer, was one such explorer who took part in multiple of these missions. Leading two further missions in 1819-22 and 1825-27, he was second in command of an expedition in the region in 1818 while traveling in the ships Dorothea and Trent. By the time Franklin and his crew were chosen to lead another voyage in 1845, he was well aware of the treachery that awaited them. He had no idea, though, that he was going to embark on a journey that would eventually rank among the greatest maritime mysteries in history. By no means was Franklin Barrow's first choice to command the mission. Barrow, who was 82 years old and nearing the end of his career, first made 5 approaches to Franklin about the position before deciding on him. 2 ships were planned for the expedition: the Vesuvius-class bomb vessel HMS Terror and the Hecla-class bomb vessel HMS Erebus. 2 of Barrow's previous contenders for the expedition leader post were named to other senior roles in the voyage, and Franklin was granted command of the Erebus. The Terror was placed under the command of Francis Crozier, an explorer and naval officer of Irish descent, while the Erebus was placed under the command of youthful naval officer James Fitzjames. The ships themselves were experienced in exploring icy waters, having been part of James Clark Ross's 1841 to 1844 Antarctic expedition, just like the man who would command the historic journey. Rigid bows for cutting through ice and iron rudders that could be pulled into heavy iron wells if the situation required it were installed on each ship. To keep their personnel somewhat comfortable in the frigid Canadian Arctic, the Erebus and Terror were also equipped with an internal steam heating system. Both ships were regarded as sturdy, cold-weather warships structurally. It has been said that Franklin took great pride in the arrangements he prepared for the trip. Throughout their journey, the officers and crew may enjoy the over 1,000 volumes in the ship's libraries. Franklin decided not to accept the standard rations of salted pork and other dry items, but to hire provisioner Stephen Goldner, who had access to then-current tinning technology, to produce 8,000 tins of food that would last for about 3 years. However, just 7 weeks before Franklin's voyage was scheduled to set out, on April 1, 1845, the contract with Goldner was drafted and completed. Due of the tight deadline, Goldner was forced to work quickly to complete the order, reportedly sacrificing a significant amount of quality control in the process. The tins were discovered to have been carelessly sealed with lead soldering, which leaked into the contents of the tins upon the ultimate discovery of the expedition's remnants. On May 9, 1845, Franklin's expedition sailed out of Greenhithe, Kent, with the assistance of HMS Rattler and the transport ship Barretto Jr. The ships first made their way to Stromness, in the Orkney Islands in northern Scotland, and then on to Greenland. More provisions were obtained upon arriving at Disco Bay in Greenland, and the crew members of the Terror and Erebus sent what would be their last letters to family members back home. 5 men were released during this stop, bringing the expedition's total number of members down to 129. While waiting for conditions to improve enough for a safe passage across Lancaster Sound, the whalers Prince of Wales and Enterprise encountered the Terror and Erebus in Baffin Bay in late July 1845, marking the last European sighting of the mission. The 129 people on board, as well as the Terror and Erebus, vanished from sight after the confrontation in Baffin Bay. This was an excursion that, in the best of times, was bound to take a while. As a result, concerns were not raised formally for a full 2 years after the expedition's departure. Lady Jane Franklin, the wife of Benjamin Franklin, and a few prominent members of Parliament started to put pressure on the Admiralty to dispatch search parties to find the missing soldiers. The first overland search group was sent out in the spring of 1848, initiating the 150-year endeavor to find out what happened to the lost Franklin mission. Between 1849 and 1859, some 32 different expeditions were conducted in an attempt to solve the mystery surrounding this tragic voyage. The first signs of the lost expedition were found during a search and rescue mission to Beechey Island in 1850. Not only was an abandoned camp from the winter of 1845-1846 found, but also something much more horrific. 3 men from Franklin's expedition were buried nearby: Petty Officer John Torrington, Royal Marine Private William Brain, and able seaman John Hartnell. At that time, no other details on Franklin's expedition's future moves were found. Search teams from Europe and America frequently looked to the local Inuit community for assistance in finding the missing men in the years after the 1850 search. Some people claim to have found artifacts that belonged to the Franklin expedition, while others related tales of foreigners starving to death near the coast. Britain formally pronounced the crews of the Terror and Erebus dead on March 31, 1854, and decided not to send out any more search parties. Despite the official ruling from Britain, Lady Franklin managed to raise enough cash to conduct a second, covert search, this time aboard the schooner Fox. After leaving England in 1857, this search team found one of the most sinister hints to date in 1859. A cairn was found on King William Island while conducting an overland search. There was a document with 2 notes left by Fitzjames and Crozier in it. The first telegram came with excellent news on May 28, 1847. The ship had begun at Beechey Island in 1846-7, with Sir John Franklin leading the expedition. Everything is fine. The second message, which was sent on April 25, 1848, gave a far worse impression. Just 2 weeks after the first telegram was written, on June 11, 1847, 24 members of the expedition, including Franklin, had passed away. The memo stated that Crozier would be leading the remaining 105 men as they headed south toward the Back River. The Fox party found another set of skeletal remains that were identified as belonging to a member of the Franklin expedition. More and more remnants of the Franklin voyage were found as the years and decades passed. More grave sites, artifacts, and first-hand accounts from the Inuit people in the area created a dismal picture of malnourishment, illness, and despair. The terrible outcome of the Franklin expedition was further confirmed by archaeological digs and exhumations conducted at Beechey Island and King William Island in the 1980s and 1990s. Many of the men's skeletons showed signs of vitamin C deficits, which eventually resulted in scurvy. Several bones uncovered at the grave sites showed skeletal patterns typical with cannibalism instances. Many of the remains also had high lead concentrations. However, it's unclear if this was due to the water distillation systems on the ships or the previously stated canned food. Some of the remains also had signs of Pott's disease, TB, and pneumonia. Despite the fact that a great deal had been discovered up to this time, the Erebus and Terror remained 2 major jigsaw pieces to be solved. The ship's wrecks wouldn't be found until 2014 and 2016, respectively. 2 fragments of a Royal Navy ship were discovered on Hat Island in the Queen Maud Gulf, close to King William Island in Nunavut, on September 1, 2014. A few days later, on September 7th, the local team declared the formal finding of the Erebus, which was found in the eastern part of Queen Maud Gulf, submerged in about 36 feet of water. Nearly 2 years later, on September 16, 2016, the Arctic Research Foundation declared that the Terror had been found in Terror Bay, which is located just south of King William Island, sunk in around 79 feet of water. Although the precise account of the Franklin voyage has been lost to time, more than a century of commitment to the historical record has given us an understanding of the struggles these 129 people endured while on their search for answers. Before finally losing to the overwhelming odds, the officers and crew fought off frigid temperatures, malnourishment, illness, lead poisoning, and even cannibalism. The enigma surrounding the lost Franklin voyage can now be resolved, mostly due to the persistence of numerous explorers, local Inuit communities, and archaeologists.